Hi, everyone. It's Katie Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. Welcome back to the YouTube channel, or welcome if you are here for the first time. Each week, I take a couple minutes in the YouTube Live and I talk about what's been happening in the aquatic industry. I use our weekly newsletter as a launching point, but I also am able to provide more context and content and reasoning as to why the different stories that we cover in the weekly newsletter matter to us as aquatic professionals. If you don't get the weekly newsletter, it's sent out on Wednesdays. It is linked in the description box down below. I'm not going to read the entire newsletter. What I'm going to do is talk about why I included the stories that I included and why I think that they are timely for aquatic professionals. So thanks so much for joining me. Let's jump right into it with the July 22nd, 2026 newsletter. The big topic on my mind this week was Cyclospora and swimming pools. So, in case you missed it, or in case you're watching this episode in the future, there has been an ongoing saga for the last week to 10 days in North America regarding Taylor Farms, allegedly, and iceberg lettuce that is contaminated. Whether that was at Taco Bell, whether that was at within iceberg lettuce bags or salad kits that you purchase from the grocery store. The exact root cause at this point is unclear. What specific farm, what specific products, but it has precipitated this kind of panic in the public sphere regarding, can people get sick from Cyclospora in swimming pools, spray parks, and splash pads? And so, what I wanted to do this week, that I'm also going to talk about right now, is give a basic layperson's understanding of what the pool water does and does not disinfect, because I think there is a two-part approach to this, where we do want to recognize that this should be a topic of conversation in our area, in our work as pool operators, pool managers. If you are in a state or a region with known Cyclospora outbreak, or people who have been, I guess not diagnosed, but confirmed cases, then there is reason to be concerned about your swimming pools and your splash parks. But I don't want people to get completely terrified that pools are inherently dirty in a way that makes them unsafe. So, a lot of this conversation mimics what I talk about in the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance Certified Pool Operator course. So, these are not just my ideas. Some of this is my actual training as an educator, my experience as a pool operator. But then, as any instructor can tell you, we have customized and adjusted over the years the way that I teach. And I feel that the way I deliver the pool content is really helpful for people who want to break down the topic in a way that is memorable and comprehensible if you're not super mechanical or if you're new to pool operations. So, one of the things that I want to say is that upfront, when we're talking about a swimming pool, everything is a form of pool. Pool being a lowercase, like POOL, not, capital water park, not capital water slide. But a pool is any sort of mechanical structure where the water aggregates and then it's recirculated with electricity. We are adding chemicals to disinfect the water. We're filtering the water because it's being recycled, recirculated, and there's some element of automation. Now, every pool is going to be different in the sense that a wave pool is obviously going to be bigger than a backyard residential pool. A splash pad is going to have less water volume than a lazy river. A water slide with a runout basin is going to look quite different from your local hot tub or spa or whirlpool. But fundamentally, these are all recirculating bodies of water. And when we talk about commercial pool applications, in many jurisdictions, they are permitted in similar ways, even if they are categorically a little bit different. There is going to be other conditions, like obviously the quality of the construction, the quality of the design, the age of the facility, the complexity of the equipment. All of that does vary. But anything that we're talking about today in this article with this conversation is a pool. So whether you're thinking about a splash pad or a kids' wading pool or an indoor water park, it is still fundamentally a pool. And one of the things that can be new to pool operators or new to people who move to aquatics from other departments, such as dry facilities or recreation or other facility management, is that the water that we swim in is not sterile and it's not perfect. So we are maintaining a basic level of disinfectant residual, which here in Canada is predominantly chlorine, maybe as well in your area, but we're not seeing as much, for example, bromine or AOP systems. We are working with chlorine in most commercial applications in North America, in my experience. We are maintaining a free available chlorine residual on purpose exactly for this reason, that when I enter your pool, I have makeup on, deodorant, maybe perfume, hair products, maybe I'm sweating from being out in the sun, I had sunscreen on, maybe my legs are dirty from hiking through grass. All of that goes into the pool if we don't have a policy to really force people to shower. And that's a topic for a different day, but honestly speaking, as a lifeguard who's worked on deck for thousands of hours, people don't tend to shower, and even if they do shower, it's not to the level that we need them to be completely soaking like a dog that goes to the groomer or a car that goes through a car wash. So, where I'm going with all of this introduction, the average customer that I've spoken to does not understand that the free available chlorine residual in the pool water is relatively low and it's only a little bit higher than your local tap or drinking water. This is because we do expect swimmers to bring in more contaminants, but we're not expecting drastic contaminants like poop in the pool or like something like Cyclospora. There is going to be something called the contact time, which is the number of minutes that it takes at a specific concentration residual to kill the contaminants in the water. And shocking to a lot of people, even basic germs like pink eye, conjunctivitis may take upwards of 8, 9, 10, 11 minutes to be killed at a relatively low concentration of chlorine. And so it's not instantaneous. And so when people bring in more contaminants or there's a known contaminant in the region that is extra high risk, there is a legitimate concern that the water may not have long enough to disinfect. That's why when there's poop in the pool or diarrhea or some obvious contaminant, we close the pool so the water has time to disinfect the germs without the presence of people swimming in it. That was my experience getting pink eye. I substituted swim lessons for 1 hour, literally 4 to 5 p.m. after my employee was in a car accident. I tell this story all the time in the certified pool operator class because it is so glaringly apparent to me that I got the pink eye from the pool. I was the pool manager at my old job. I had been in my office all day. I had not engaged with children in any way. I lived alone that summer, and none of my staff had pink eye. But this employee got into a car accident. Thankfully, she was okay. And she called in to say, I'm going to miss my shift. There's a police report happening at the scene. Obviously, go home, don't come to work. So I got into a swimsuit and I taught her preschool lessons from 4 to 4:30 and 4:30 to 5. And I don't recall seeing any of the preschoolers with pink eye, but I was interacting with them directly, chest distance away. We were doing floats, we were doing glides in warm water that I checked later did have the right disinfectant residual. I believe it was 2.5 or 3 parts per million or milligrams per liter. But I woke up the next day at home with double pink eye. And that is the only possible cause because immediately after teaching lessons at 5 o'clock, I showered and went home. So, as best as I believe, I was teaching lessons, and the contact time for conjunctivitis is, like I said, 8, 9, 10, 11 minutes. And so, if I'm working with these kids and the water is splashing in my face for 30 minutes, there's definitely the high potential that the bacteria is not going to all be killed floating from the kid who is basically arm length away. The tie-in to Cyclospora is if you're in a region like Ohio or Arizona where there have been documented cases, it is reasonable to think that there is a hazard perhaps if kids or their families go to use a spray park or a water park or a pool, and that bacteria in the water could infect other people. That doesn't mean I think wholesale we should be shutting down pools like we did during the pandemic, thinking that we don't know the science of the bacteria, that the risk to public health is higher than the loss to recreation of the community. I don't think that at all. But I do think, as I describe in the newsletter, we do need to take this opportunity for interacting with our customers to provide more education, whether that's through social media, whether that's through an on deck attendant who is greeting people. That is one of the most basic principles of customer service and effective water safety and drowning prevention. Having somebody on the deck greeting people, "Hey, how's your day going? Could you go back and shower, please? Hey, how's the weather? How's your family doing today?" Those conversations can stimulate a lot of information. And this is something I do all the time myself when I'm out in the world. So even today, I was doing a site visit in a small community and I stopped at a bakery to get a snack and a bottle of water. And I talked to the bakery clerk about a project that is known to be happening in the area. And she said, "Well, you can check the project website for that new facility." And I said, "That's not the most up to date information. You live in this community. Why don't you tell me what you're hearing from your parents, your family, your friends?" It's not secret information. It's just saying what's another source of information. Same way when I was at a hotel last weekend for work, I talked to the valets, the doormen. They see everything while they stand outside all day parking cars. "Hey, what's happening with this building down the street? What have you heard? What have you seen?" They're not going to share things that are confidential, but their job is to stand outside and wait all day. So they are a great source of information. In that vein, talking to people is a great way to engage. Is somebody, their throat is raspy or they're coughing and sneezing or they look under the weather, things like that. I'm not saying that talking to your customers allows you to diagnose or prevent cyclospora in your water, but it's definitely something that I think is a layer of mitigation if you're not sure what you should be doing. Can you also raise your free available chlorine residual? Absolutely. That's going to be completely appropriate. And I talk about this as well in the certified pool operator class. We have our minimum requirements in our jurisdiction by regulation. So, for example, if we're talking about Alberta, warmer water, a spray park, splash pad, wading pool has to have a free chlorine of 2 or higher. We don't want to jack the chlorine up to 10 or 20 because that's not an industry standard of care. That's going to lead to injury. That's going to lead to bleached fabric. That's going to lead to skin drying out. And that's not cost effective. But that's the main job of the pool operator, is to bridge what the minimum says that we need with a level that's appropriate to the usage. Particularly when we talk about, for example, the splash pad I saw today was outdoors in a sunny environment. And we don't use a lot of stabilizer here in Alberta in our outdoor facilities. But if you don't use stabilizer, then you do need to have a higher amount of chlorine on a hot July day because the UV sunlight we know is going to break apart the chlorine. So, to bring it back to the purpose of the op ed at the beginning of the newsletter, I really wanted to identify that the water that we swim in is not sterile on its own. It does rely on additional disinfectant to make it safe for people to use the pool. And if there are new conditions, so if, for example, in your community, in the region, there have been cases of cyclospora documented, then it is going to be appropriate as a pool operator to mitigate your standard procedures, adjust your chemicals higher, or create other frameworks for mitigating against this. So, whether that is some swimming pools or wading pools that have a 10-minute pause. When I was at Atlantis in the Bahamas a couple years ago, they have, I don't remember the exact signage, but it was like a 10-minute bathroom break coded as a cleaning break every 90 minutes or so, forcing kids to take a break because they may be so excited that they don't do so without the directive. Like, let's actually clear this wading pool for 10 minutes every 90 minutes. And if we need to do some other remediation with the operations, we can. So something like that could also be appropriate. I don't have all the ideas. I'm just here to provide suggestions and remind people that the pool is intended to be a recreation environment, a fun environment. It's not a set it and forget it amenity. It is very dynamic, and this is going to be one of those things. It's hot, it's July, your facilities are crowded. Now we need to throw cyclospora into the mix. we don't actually know what's in the water, right? My tap water that I just filled up my cup, I don't know what's in it. We rely on those guardrails of free available chlorine and pH, but we only test a couple times a day. So maybe we increase our testing, maybe we increase the level. These are just some ideas to get you started. If you have other ideas or suggestions, feel free to pop those in the comment. Some CDC resources like What's in My Cannonball, which can be a great way to educate and inform your members and your users through social media, or even just printing out a poster, right? And putting it up in the pool environment. If this kind of thing is interesting to you and you don't feel really informed about this back end of how the pool works, consider registering for a certified pool operator course. That is my passion for teaching. Yes, we cover the minimum foundation that you need to run your pool, but as an experienced certified pool operator instructor for the last 10 years, I'm also a CPO instructor trainer for the Pool Hot Tub Alliance. I've taught over 3,000 students. I really do have a passion, not for just pumping out students. Like, I know people think that's all I do. That's not the case at all. I want to break down the concepts in a way that are meaningful to you to understand the why, the how, the what. And yes, we talk about mechanical and we talk about equipment, but if you know how the system is intended to operate, how the components work together, that's going to make you far more qualified in whatever role that you have to make better decisions and protect your users. The other thing on the go this week is National Drowning Prevention Week. As a lifeguard, swim instructor, water safety and drowning prevention advocate, trust me, I love the idea that we're educating, informing the community in the summer when people are swimming about water safety and drowning prevention. I just think the timing is so frustrating for pool operators and staff who are already overwhelmed in July. And I understand we want to strike while the iron is hot, but I also think it's really, really tough to manage. I was at my own local outdoor pool swimming earlier this week because my national lifeguard recert is coming up in September. And the lifeguards had done a good job. They'd put up some streamers, some balloons, they had some coloring sheets. But I could also tell, just as a lifeguard observing other lifeguards, they had swim lessons in the morning, then they had to convert the pool to lane swim. There was a chemical delivery that had to be put away. It was really hot. People were really cranky. They're doing the best that they can. We are all in the height of summer, and it's like a countdown to Labor Day or whenever the pool is going to open and things get more normal and slow down, at least in Canada where I am. So one of the things I did share is the classic illustration from Natalie, and forgive me, I forgot her, Natalie and Ashley at Alive Solutions. They are a consulting firm out of the United States with a heavy water park background. So they have a number of classes that you can take, like in-service leader. They have a dispatch water slide education program. They also do a lot of in-service ideas in their monthly newsletter. They have a social media presence on Facebook and Instagram. Alive Solutions, or you might see their accounts as Aquatic's Vibe. They created this now viral illustration in 2021 that has been copied and replicated all over the world by all types of media organizations regarding the visual impact of not putting your children in bright swimsuits in dark water. And they've done this with pool finishes, lake water. It's very compelling. And this, in my opinion, is the very low lift that we all need when we're very, very tired. And we want to advocate for water safety, especially in our personal networks, like outside of all of our pool people. But we just don't have the time or the energy with everything else going on. Last but not least, I always talk about some different news stories. There were a lot of great updates this week, but some lack the level of detail that I know you probably want and I probably want. So the big one coming out of Italy is an allegation of a hair entrapment of a young girl, 11 years old, in a wading pool. I shared a link to the details that we do have currently, which is not a lot. And I'm not suggesting that the family should disclose all of their trauma, but as a pool operator, we do want to know some of the circumstances to avoid this happening in the future. So I hope that I can share more in future newsletters as details come out. I did link to an Italian news source that has a photo of the pool covered in a tarp. It does look really, really shallow. So I hope we can get some more information on this in the coming weeks. But many of you know, if you've been here for a while, I am a huge entrapment advocate, which is a very weird thing to say, but I am so interested in documenting and talking about entrapment. I've been doing this for years in terms of news articles, YouTube videos, my advocacy in class, because it is 100% prevention. Once it happens, the injuries are catastrophic. But I do feel personally and respectfully that there is this complacency in our industry that this never happens anymore since the Virginia Graham Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act. And that's just not the case. I remember the article I wrote for Pool Pro magazine probably 5, 6 years ago. The fact checker said, well, anti-entrapment doesn't happen anymore. And I sent back a resource from Blue Cap or the CDC, I don't remember, and there was 17 documented entrapments in the 10 years of that report. And this is all since the Virginia Graham Baker Act was signed into federal law in the United States in 2009. So don't tell me it doesn't happen anymore. It may also be happening in a non-fatal way where we know that there are significant brain injuries and comorbidities that occur with a submersion that's not quantified as a death because the child lives as a vegetable for the rest of their lives. So I will link to some of the videos I did a few years ago regarding Alaya Lynette Jaco. Content warning, they are very graphic regarding her death in Houston through entrapment. It is definitely something that still happens. We see reports from places like Brazil, from Italy. It's not to cast aspersions on those countries. It's just the reality that these things do happen. I was on a cruise ship once and I put my feet on the whirlpool drain and the suction was incredible. It was very, very dangerous. I immediately went to go tell somebody, hey, this needs to be looked at. I don't know if something is open that should be closed. I don't know if there's some sort of issue with the pump, but I could feel my feet being sucked onto the drain cover with just simply resting them on the bottom of the pool. And that should not happen. I also shared a horrible incident that happened this week in the Glebe portion of Ottawa, Canada's capital. That's where I grew up. They have a series of older wading pools that I grew up going to. Some recirculate, most do not. They're dump and fill. They are often staffed by wading pool attendants who also need to manage the water chemistry. So, for example, when I was a kid, they would clear the pool every hour to hour and a half and manually add chlorine into the wading pool because there's no automation on some of these older grandfathered vessels. And unfortunately, drownings happen all the time. But I've been tracking drownings on wading pools specifically for a project that I'm engaged on because there is the false perception, in my opinion, with the client that wading pools are not high risk. And so, unfortunately, this was a story that hit my radar because I'm tracking these wading pool incidents as precedent for this client in the future to also have wading pool attendants or also have lifeguards. And the photos in this article are just so heartbreaking. I, on the one hand, don't appreciate that they have photos of the crying staff, but on the other hand, as a quasi photographer, appreciate the photojournalism that they're so visceral. It's just a really, really crappy situation. And my thoughts go out to the family of that child because you think, and I said this to the client today, we are misled to believe that wading pools, spray parks, and splash pads are somehow easier to manage. Like the facility I saw today, they have a splash pad and they were completely misled by the builder and the installer about how much work would go into the water quality management, the testing, the safety. It's still a pool. There's less aggregation of the water. There are some things that are easier, but it is still high risk in terms of bacteria, in terms of injuries from jets of water, maintenance, annual requirements. It's not inherently easier. And I continue to see these articles throughout the media around the world, but normatively, I'm seeing it for North America, where a lot of these outdoor pools in cities are reaching their end of lifespan, and they're filling them in and building, let's say, 2 splash pads in the community instead of 1 wading pool. And council or the strategic steering committee, they truly do believe this will be easier. There's less drowning hazard, there's less risk. And in some cases, that's the case, but in other cases, it's just as much work. It's just how it's spread out from less lifeguards to more operational staff or facility staff. We had a number of facility project updates this week, some that I can speak to on the record, for example, in the newsletter, the articles I've linked. Some I can't speak to yet. It was off the record, so I'm waiting for there to be more information. So the town of High River, which some of you know, is located not too far from me and which has been going through an extended saga of renovation and expansion on an existing 43-year-old facility that flooded during the 2013 flood. It keeps taking longer and longer and longer to finish this project, unsurprisingly, because anytime you open up an old building, you discover problems of any sort of age or infrastructure. So for this particular project, it has been pushed back now to open in November. I hope for the community's sake that is the final timeline, but I wouldn't be surprised because I just saw on my memories for the Lakeview Facebook page delays last year in terms of the intervals where the town or the community thought they would have access to certain basins or certain facilities during the phased renovation approach. This project started. Honestly, I feel like it was 2023, 2024. Don't quote me on that. It's just been a saga. And so council did come out and say that it's delayed until November. I did have a tip off from my husband's friend's wife who lives in High River last week before this came out. But unsurprisingly, like I said, Cam Rose had a similar issue when they opened up the roof. The roof was condemned. That added 9 to 12 months to the project. Other facilities in Calgary, the same thing. When you open up something old, there's no guarantee what you're going to find. And that's how it's not scope creep on purpose. It's just the reality of pools are humid. They have chemicals. Things move and shift over the years. There's freezing and thawing in Canada. You guys know this. You're pool people. Raven Song, a facility, I believe, on the island, like Vancouver Island, is getting a bunch of federal money to help with their pool upgrades. The city of Weyburn in Saskatchewan, I shared this on our Facebook page today, they are celebrating the last few weeks of operating their pool, also due to catastrophic damage to the facility where it's reached the end of its life cycle. Unfortunately, the community, some members of the community, it's always just some, the vocal minority, who are upset about the consultation that they feel has not happened in terms of design. I always take that with a grain of salt. As a former municipal pool manager, you could have surveys, radio ads, newspaper ads, posters, social media, and people miss it all and claim you didn't consult with them, but they didn't engage. So you have to move these projects forward in a meaningful way, especially when we're talking about municipal resources, budgets, timelines. You do want to be fair, but you also can't wait to hear from everyone. There was a good article this week in the Canadian Medical Association Journal regarding what it will mean to public health for all of these swimming pools in Canada to close. And if you've been following the newsletter for any length of time, you know that this is the tip of the iceberg. These closures feel compounded, in my opinion, because of COVID-19, the pandemic closures, and it aggravated some situations. But when we look at communities who may not have built pools since the 60s, 70s, 80s, look at the city of Regina, Saskatchewan as a classic example. They had not built a new aquatic facility since 1992. And that's where now they're investing $200 million in a large new mega facility, but it's going to take several years to build. And then what do the population projections look like thereafter? Is it going to be enough, or do they need to turn around and build another pool? Some communities are on this ball and other communities are not. I'm in Alberta, and the city of Airdrie, north of Calgary, is trying to play catch up in the same way that 15 years ago, Airdrie was much smaller. It was a bedroom community, commuter community of Calgary, one pool, one library, one high school. And now it's approaching 100,000 people, and they need both a new indoor pool and a new outdoor pool. But who has that kind of money in this economy when people are struggling and you don't want to raise taxes and things like that? This is a project I had heard rumors about, and so I was happy to see an actual press release slash news article. The Oliver, which is in the Marriott in downtown Calgary, south of downtown, is going to be having a new outdoor Nordic spa. I think it's going to be kind of cool. It's going to be on like patio area outside of the building on an upper deck. So interested to see that. City of Ottawa, where I grew up, as I mentioned earlier, they are talking about a memorandum of understanding between Carleton University and the city to investigate starting the development of a new 50-meter pool. And this is a classic example where when I was growing up in Ottawa in the 90s and early 2000s, we were blessed to have three 50-meter Olympic pools in a city under 1 million people. We had the Nepean Sportsplex, we had Ottawa University, and we had Carleton. All of those 50-meter pools are now approaching 40, 50, 60 years old. We can't replace three 50-meter pools all at once. Nobody has that kind of money. But if nobody bites the bullet and starts, we're going to get to 2030, 2035 and lose all those pools. And I don't have any secret information about the lifespan of those pools. I just know as a swimmer for my life going to those pools, and then as a consultant visiting some of those pools in an unofficial capacity, it's any old building, right? There's changes that happen and need to happen. And what price does that cost eventually? There was also an article about a Central Florida lifeguard who survived a near lightning strike, which is a huge issue in aquatics, is lightning and both swimmers and staff. There are some complaints in the city of Detroit regarding not having enough pool infrastructure. I shared a few months ago in one of these videos my own involvement with HCMA, a tender that we responded to for the Huron-Clinton Municipal Association regarding pools. So this does not surprise me at all that they are also reaching a critical infrastructure point in terms of, any city, and Detroit is shrinking. It used to be a massive hub of industry with, when we talk about Motor City, right? Car construction, union jobs, wealthy middle class, comfortable. And many of you will know the story of Detroit the last 20, 30 years where, homes have been abandoned, streets, it's harder to maintain the infrastructure of streets and roads, and pools would be part of that. Where a smaller population, it's harder to find those, quote, nice to have projects because you're struggling to pay for essential services like garbage pickup or clearing snow in the winter or road repair. This was an article out of British Columbia. There is a outdoor open water swimming event called Across the Lake. I believe it was near Penticton, and a gentleman drowned during that open water swim, which is super upsetting. We also have Ironman is in Cochrane, Alberta this weekend, so not too far from me. I was speaking with some service providers today who do the porta potties for that event, and all of the swimmers who are going to be swimming in a water body here in Alberta that doesn't necessarily warm up that much, because a lot of our water is glacier fed or runoff from the mountains, and it stays pretty cold. So I hope everyone is safe this weekend, but I wouldn't be surprised if, hopefully this is not the case, somebody does get hurt in open water swimming, because it is just so dangerous, so crowded, and people really push themselves. If you spend $1,200 to register for an Ironman event, you are going to go hard whether you are ready or not, whether you have slept well, whether you have altitude issues. We are not as high as Colorado, but I've certainly been with friends and colleagues who are visiting Alberta and feel out of breath in our elevated altitude. There were some air quality issues across the eastern US and Canada last week, so I only included one article regarding the closure for air quality, but I know that was an issue for many of you. I shared a article pertaining to a grandmother who was charged in the drowning fatality of their child. As I've said repeatedly, I don't like to see family members, guardians charged with their child's death. It's already that they're going to live their lives regretting their decisions and their choices. But it's always interesting to me how some organizations, some police departments, some regions decide to charge someone and some do not. And that's the main reason I share these articles in the news. Doggy daycare in California pauses operations after dog drowns. I toyed with whether to include this story or not because this is typically a human swimming pool newsletter, but this was one that definitely crossed my path in terms of when I looked at the social media post for this kennel daycare situation. There is a quote pool body of water on the property, but it does make me wonder, dogs don't all know how to swim. And if the water is deeper than it appears in the photos, then that might make sense. But I do think the pet owner, I'm not saying they have a legal case, but they do have reason to be concerned if their dog had been to this site before and had been fine. And I believe it was a bulldog. Don't quote me on that, but it was definitely like one of those, slouchy faced, chunky dogs with short legs. They do have reason to be upset if they took their dog to be supervised in a care facility and then they drowned. And the pet owner is alleging that they were not notified of the dog's drowning when it happened. It was only at the end of the day when they went to collect their dog that they didn't take the dog to seek medical care or any sort of intervention. So it's an interesting story to me for that reason. That's why I basically shared it in the newsletter. I also shared a really good article from a parenting expert, a pediatrician who talks about safety fatigue amongst parents. And this came up in my conversation with Kate Connell, a video that I haven't released yet on the YouTube channel. It's going to be coming out in a couple of weeks regarding water safety on vacation. And this was something that she addressed as well, that it can be kind of hard as a parent to know what to focus on because there is this fear culture, fear fomented in some media that like everything could hurt your child. So where do you focus? Like what is reasonable? And so I definitely empathize for parents who, that was one of the headlines I saw this week. So we now have to worry about cyclospora in wading pools. Like I'm exhausted. I could understand that that's a lot, absolutely. But how do we actually address a root real concern and not overstate it? How do we, look at what actually matters, if that makes sense? In the United Kingdom, there is another new prime minister. I think they're up to 6 or 7 in less than 10 years. You guys know it's been a rotating door. And I really liked that the Royal Life Saving Society UK, they came out to make a pitch to the new prime minister, Andy Burnham. They had gone into his political record. I believe he was the mayor of Manchester. Don't quote me on that, but he was the mayor of a larger urban area. And apparently he had had some water safety initiatives in his city, and they're looking to see him take a stand with larger water safety initiatives nationally. Last but not least, there has been a huge heat wave in Europe, a heat wave in North America, and so a number of people have drowned. Estimates are 131 drowning fatalities since June 19th. So just over a month in France associated with the heat wave. People trying to cool off, I would imagine, in places in their community that are not necessarily suitable for swimming or that exceed their swimming capacity. Last but not least, in the newsletter every week, I share some of the different things that have been happening. So I have a video with Kate Connell, our discussion about AI, what is appropriate use for AI in aquatics, what is not. And then I also shared my vlog from IAPA, which is a expo that happens every November in Florida. And so I shared the inaugural water park day. I shared some of my experience in the trade show. I have 2 different videos about IAPA, one from 2025, one from 2024. I'm not able to attend any of the trade shows this year in 2026. I have some other commitments that I just have to proceed with. So I wanted to make sure that these were up for those of you who are still considering how to spend your professional development dollars this year. IAPA is a big time commitment, going to Florida and being there for long enough to really get value out of the trade show and education sessions if you're a member. World Water Park Association, I shared those videos last week, is also a good option even if you don't operate a water park. I tell any big pool manager or any larger property recreation center, there is value in going to that conference as well. The hard part is it is in Vegas this year, and not every organization is going to allow their staff to spend their dollars to go to the US, to go to Vegas. The public perception of that venue, even though it's unfair to the conference, that is just one of their preferred cities in terms of it being, quote, central to access. That's why it's in Vegas every few years. I went to the show in Vegas 2 years ago, 3 years ago. There's also vlogs available on that on our YouTube channel. So that's it for this week. Thank you so much for watching, reading, listening, doing what you do. I appreciate you being here. I'm playing around with the length not being so motor mouth, not being so rushed. I know I can really trip over my words and it's difficult to understand, but I'm trying to balance between who has 40 minutes to listen to me talk. Thank you if you've made it this far, catching up on admin or payroll or scheduling, whatever that looks like. Other people tell me it's too long. And as many of you know, with my Camp Mystic video a few weeks ago, that was 2 hours and 20 minutes just in one take. I feel that there's a lot of context and information that is necessary to a lot of these stories and to understanding how my brain works as a consultant and as someone who supports your operations. So if you are here and this makes sense to you, you enjoy it, thank you. Please give this video a like, a share, a comment, or subscribe to the newsletter if you find these videos too long to listen to. The newsletters are usually under 2,000 words, typically around 1,500 words. And so it is a bit of a time commitment, but I really do try and make it curated and worth your while so you know what's happening in our industry that you should be aware of. Thank you so much. I will be back next week with more news that's crossed my desk. I will see you then. Bye for now.